So today I want to talk about how to argue better. Now, everyone is familiar with the normal way of argumentation when you want to argue for a conclusion. What you do is you start with a set of propositions that you called premises, and then you try to show the logical connection between that set of propositions and the conclusion. I want to explain that I believe that this is not the best way to approach a problem. This is not the best way to argue for a conclusion, and this is not the usual way that I try to argue for a proposition. For example, anti-natalism, as I will use an example of it to show this other approach that I'm proposing. So, why do I think that this normal way of arguing is not the best way? Well, there are a couple of reasons. First, I believe that when you talk to someone else and you come up with this sort of argument, let's say you try to argue for the position of anti-natalism, you try to show that, okay, having children is morally wrong. So you will start with this set of propositions, call your premises, and then you try to show the logical connection. You try to show that the truth of these propositions is sufficient for the truth of conclusion. Now, let's imagine that the other person finds something wrong with one of your premises. What happens there? Basically, your argument is dead, right? So if the other person recognizes something wrong with one of your premises, then your argument is dead. They won't listen to your argument anymore. They're not required by logic to listen to your argument anymore because it won't work, right? And of course, you will try to defend your premise, but you will try to defend your premise in exactly the same way. You will try again, bring up an argument similar to the one that you just did. So that I believe is a very kind of weak point about this way of argumentation, because you come with this whole set of propositions, and the other person just finds one of them bad, and you're done. And the other aspect of this is that this kind of argumentation is deceiving you, because when we are thinking about that argument, because we believe in the premises, we think that we have a very strong argument. So we go to the other person thinking that we have this very interesting, strong argument for our case. And the other person is not convinced because they just see some fault with one of your premises, and that's it. So from the other person's perspective, you look kind of weird. You're frustrated. You think that what you believe is true and it's obvious, but you're not getting it. So you will become actually frustrated because you think, okay, oh man, I have this powerful argument. Why is it not convincing for the other person? Why doesn't he agree with me? And so the other person is basically sitting back and just looking at your argument, finding all these problems, and you're the one doing all the job here. And I don't think that's a powerful way of arguing, and that's not the full power of logic that we have at hand here. That's only partial part of it. The way that I usually do it, and for example, for arguing for anti-natalism, when I talk to other people, is to try to listen to the other person's perspective, try to get an understanding of the set of propositions that they believe in around that topic, and then try to find logical inconsistencies in that set of proposition. And I believe that there is always this kind of inconsistency in the other person's belief system if we believe that we are consistent and if our position around the topic is different from each other. We can see this more clearly because imagine that I have a set of propositions that I believe in and the other person also has a set of propositions that they believe in. if we have a different stand on a proposition, let's say whether having children is moral or not, and I'm an anti-natalist, I believe no, it's not moral. The other person thinks that it's okay. Now, if we have these two sets, right? If we are different at this position, and if we can find a common point between these two sets of propositions, so between myself and the other person, and I will talk about this common point later on. So if we have different stands on about a position, and there is a shared point in our way of thinking, and if there is strong enough kind of sufficient and necessary logical connections between propositions, it's usually the case that there is an inconsistency in the set of it's either in my set of propositions there is an inconsistency, or in the set of the other person's. And when we go into an argument with basically we believe that our position is correct and we are consistent. So that would mean that if we go into an argument with someone else and we have a shared point with them and we believe that we are consistent, which we do, and we have a different proposition from what they believe, then that would mean that necessarily there is an inconsistency in the other person's belief system. So we just have to find it. And note that the first way of argumentation that I talked about, the normal way that we do things, that is basically a special kind of this kind of argumentation. Because when we say that a set of proposition P is sufficient for the truth of Q, we're basically saying that the set of P and not Q is inconsistent, is logically impossible to happen. So this is a more general, more powerful way of approaching this problem. Now, about that common point, I believe that we can always find such a common point, like about any issue. So, for example, about the anti-natalism, we basically need to find something that we both agree on, that, for example, is morally wrong. And I believe we can always find such a point. So the approach in general is to ask the other person a couple of questions and try to find this common ground, right? And then try to look for inconsistencies in the other person's set of beliefs. And as we said, we have good grounds to believe that there is such an inconsistency in the other person's beliefs. And this form of argument is very different from the other form. Because first of all, the premises that we start with, I mean, there are no starting set of premises that we go to a conclusion. We are basically analyzing and looking at the set of beliefs of the other person. So we are not imposing anything. We're not claiming that an argument, that a set of proposition is true or anything. We're just looking and analyzing the other person's set of beliefs. I'm having a déjà vu here. That's weird. Like I knew that. I don't know. I've explained this thing before. Anyway, so we're not starting from that set of propositions. So it's basically their set of beliefs. So we are kind of safe on that ground because we are just using the information that they are providing us. And the argument is not deceiving for us, again, because we really don't know the argument yet. We are asking the other persons about their beliefs, and we are shaping the argument as we gain more information. So we're not really, we're not carrying around an argument in our head that we think is very powerful. We're just making the argument as we go on, right? So that's one part. And the other thing is that we will not look frustrated here. Basically, now is the other person who's doing all the job, because now we're just asking questions, trying to find that inconsistency in their belief system. So it's basically the opposite point of the first way of arguing, and I believe is much more powerful. Now let's just go into an example and see, and just look at the practical side of it. Let's say that I want to argue for anti-natalism. That's usually the way that I do. I start asking them questions like, okay, do you believe that it's like, what do you think? Like, is it okay if I go on the street, find someone, punch them, break their nose, and then give them $1 million? Is that okay or not? You see, I'm not imposing anything. I'm not saying that, hey, this is bad, hey, this is wrong. I'm just asking them, do you think that's fine? Do you think that is okay if I go and punch someone, break their nose, and give them $1 million? Now, we don't know what they're going to answer, because people will answer differently based on their background, based on their view on ethics. It really doesn't matter, because we know that there's going to be an inconsistency there somewhere. So let's say that that person says that, no, it's not fine. I'm just trying to make it easy, but yeah, that person could say, yes, it's fine, and then you have to carry on until you find a common point. But let's say we already find it here. I don't want to make a very long video here. So let's say that person says, no, I don't think that's correct. And then I will ask, okay, but why? Why is it not correct? I might even play devil's advocate here, just to try to get information as much as I can from the other person's belief system. So I would ask, why is it wrong that I can go on the street, punch someone, and then give them $1 million? And they will be like, okay, so maybe they won't like it, Maybe they're a millionaire and they don't need that $1 million. And then I would say, okay, let's assume that when you give them $1 million, they become actually happy. They will be like, okay, thank you for punching me. Maybe even punch me again and give them another $1 million. What then? Let's say the person still says, no, that's still bad. And then I will say, okay, why is that bad? They're happy that I punched them. Why is that bad? And the other person says, well, I believe it's bad because I don't have their consent. Like, if I go on the street and ask for other people, hey, can I punch you and then give you $1 million? And if they say, hey, it's okay, yes, then okay, we can say that's fine. You can punch them, give them $1 million. But if we don't have their consent, we can't go on the street, punch them, break their nose, and then give them $1 million, even if they are happy afterwards because of that punch. Now I'm just assuming that the other person is so aligned with the way that I'm thinking, again, because I don't want to make this example too long. The point that I'm trying to make is that when you get a person to that position, you're like, okay, that's exactly what I believe too. So that's a shared point. So you found that point, right? And from there, you can start building up and start looking for that inconsistency in their belief. Because in my mind, if that is bad and that's false, that it follows from that necessarily that having children is also bad. Because they're exactly the same thing, right? So then I will ask them, after they explain all of this, I will ask them that, okay, but you believe that having children is okay, right? What is the difference between this example and that example? What is the difference between punching someone and then giving them $1 million and having a child who's going to enjoy the life that they're given? What's the difference between them? You see, I'm still not imposing anything. I'm just asking them. I want them to see their own inconsistency. Because if you think about it, when you bring someone into this world, you are basically punching them. You are forcing something that that, we do not have their consent for it. We know that there exists pain in this life. So that's like the punch that I'm taking here, right? And then that my giving $1 million to them, that's similar to the joy of this life. And they might be happy. They might be happy that they are given this life in the same way that those people are happy that they've been punched. But in the same way that punching those people and give them $1 million is not okay because we do not have their consent, is not our choice to make, it's the same scenario here, that it's not our choice to make, right? Now, you see, I'm not, like, I might give the other person some hints about these kind of things, but you can see how I'm doing this. Basically, I will just try to show them the inconsistency in their own views. Now, the other person could have gone into different branches. He could have answered things differently, but that really doesn't matter. You just have to keep going until you find that common point that you think that there is enough logical connection between that point and anti-natalism. And then you try to see, okay, if I agree with proposition A and the other person agrees with A, and I believe that there is a logical connection between A and anti-natalism, and the other person does not believe in anti-natalism, then that basically means that there is an inconsistency, either in my system or in their system. But when we go into a debate, I guess we believe that we do not have that inconsistency. But even if we do have it, that will show actually our inconsistency, and that will be, again, a positive thing. But if we assume that we do not have that inconsistency, and anti-natalism is actually true, and we do have that shared point, that basically means that the other person is making a mistake. And so our problem is no longer trying to logically argue from a set of premise that we have brought into this argumentation, and then try to show the logical connection from that set of premise into conclusion. We are just asking questions, and it's the other person doing the most of the work. They will answer it. They will argue for their own position because everyone thinks that they have reasons. So they will actually provide much information for the questions that you ask. And your job is just to see clearly the inconsistency and guide them, not even show them directly, because that will again be like an attack that they will go defensive. Just try to hint to them, just walk with them until they see their own inconsistency. And I've seen this work. Like, you might think that, oh, that really doesn't happen, but I've seen it work. Like, in different topics, I've argued with people, and they come to a point that they're like, I don't know, like, yeah, I don't know. You see that they sense this conflict, and people will lose sleep over this, They won't lose sleep over the first form of argument. If you argue for them something like that from premise to conclusion, they're gonna be okay, yeah, but that premise too is a little bit, I don't know, fishy, I don't know, and they will forget about it, like, because they don't feel the force of it, and they're gonna lose sleep over it. But this form, when they see the clash, when they see this contradiction in their own belief system, it's not something that we have brought to the table. It's their own sets of beliefs. Those are the premises that we're working on. They're gonna lose sleep over it, and they will be thinking about it. And I believe that has actually more effect. It's much more flexible because, as I said, people come from different backgrounds. They have different ethical systems, and they answer differently. And you can't have one universal argument for everyone. You might have one, but that I'm pretty sure is going to be so deep and so fundamental. It will go into meta ethics and even metaphysics. It will go to very fundamental level, philosophical level, that it will not be practical for common people, I would say. So this is usually the way that I argue, that I approach this problem with other people. First, try to understand their position, just asking them questions, trying to understand their reasoning. What I'm doing, basically gathering all the information that I can, find a common point, and then try to make the connection between that and anti-natalism by showing the inconsistency in their belief systems.